In Part 4 of Module 11 on entitlements, we'll discuss public assistance. In 1996, a bipartisan coalition of senators and representatives in the U.S. Congress passed the Welfare Reform Act, and President Clinton signed the act into law. With an eye to achieving outcomes like those associated with the state and local welfare reforms of the prior decade, the Republican majority in Congress hoped to eradicate one major element of the welfare state. The Welfare Reform Act of 1996. Public assistance is focused less on the individual recipient of the benefit than it is on the community as a whole and requires work in exchange for temporary relief. A limit of 2 years to be used before parents would be working or in job training. Additionally, no recipient could have more than 5 years of assistance cumulatively. The state and local welfare policy reforms preceding the 1996 Act generally tightened eligibility requirements for recipients and placed time limits on the length of time one could receive welfare benefits. After over a decade of experience with the welfare reform movement, we can say with some confidence that the 1996 Act represents the beginning of a change in American thinking about what public assistance as an entitlement might mean in the new millennium. The new target of public assistance is less the individual recipient of the benefit than it is the community. Temporary assistance for needy families is the primary federal policy on public assistance in the United States. As a result of the 1996 Welfare Reform Act, TANF replaced Aid to Families with Dependent Children, or AFDC. A block grant program, TANF, or Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, requires states to develop specific public assistance plans to reflect state and local values, but within the general TANF requirements. Temporary Assistance to Needy Families, or TANF, formerly known as welfare. TANF provides cash assistance to families with dependent children. The Office of Family Assistance, Administration on Children and Families, a unit within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, is the federal office which oversees TANF block grant dispersals and oversees state policy requirements to determine if they meet TANF eligibility guidelines. With the 1996 federal statute as the primary guideline, the Office of Family Assistance outlines 4 major goals for the TANF program: assisting needy families so that children can be cared for in their own homes, reducing the dependency of needy parents by promoting job preparation, work, and marriage, preventing out-of-wedlock pregnancies, and encouraging the formation and maintenance of 2-parent families. The TANF program limits individuals who receive TANF money to 5 years, although states can impose either shorter or longer time limits. But no more than 20% of the state welfare caseload can go beyond the 5-year time limit. If a state wishes to use its own resource to extend welfare benefits, it may do so. Proponents of TANF argue that the time limits are flexible enough to allow states to make their own choices about public assistance. But critics argue that states with the greatest need are often incapable of self-financing extended welfare benefits. TANF requires that recipients meet work requirements unless approved waivers are granted by state and national TANF administrators. 2-parent families must work 35 to 40 hours per week, while single-parent family work requirements are 30 hours per week. Certain exceptions are made for single parents who have children under 6 years of age who cannot find adequate child care and thus cannot balance their employment requirements with child care responsibilities. Work may constitute full-time employment in salaried positions, but may also include participation in employment training programs, on-the-job training, civic service activities, or even successful participation in formal secondary education. Proponents of TANF argue that the work requirements are broad enough to provide TANF recipients the opportunity to gain skills necessary for financial independence post-assistance. Criticism of the work requirement generally focuses on the potential for limited access to the full scope of work activities in states and local communities. Ultimately, post-TANF program participation, gainful employment must be found. Unfortunately, in communities lacking employment opportunities, TANF recipients are faced with little hope for the future after their benefits have expired. TANF does make accommodations for states to create jobs directly or to provide job incentives for private employers so that TANF recipients will have greater chance of obtaining gainful employment when their eligibility expires. TANF monitors all U.S. state programs to determine if the federal statutory requirements associated with the program are being met. If a state fails to meet these requirements, then TANF grant amounts to the state can be reduced administratively. Proponents argue that reporting requirements keep states in line with the national goal of streamlining the program and moving welfare recipients into the workforce. Critics argue that reporting requirements excessively limit each state's ability to be innovative and responsive with public assistance programming to meet state and local needs. TANF requires that the states spend a certain percentage of their own funds to support public assistance programming efforts. These local fund matches are calculated by TANF under their Maintenance of Effort, or MOE, as a percentage of the amount of money spent by TANF in a given state. MOE monies are calculated in terms of state MOE requirements and in terms of state separate voluntary MOE commitments. The steadiest resource base for TANF is the federal government, but as noted previously, that commitment is clearly flattening out, even showing some diminishment in real dollar year-on-year percentage terms. In part, this decline in federal funding reflects the decline in the average number of recipients in TANF programs, a possible sign of success for the long process of welfare reform in the United States. A very significant portion of TANF expenditures is for non-assistance purposes, that is, administrative expenditures. Between 2000 and 2002, the trend for administrative expenditures as a proportion of TANF total expenditure was on the rise. The trend reflects the fact that many expenditures made under TANF are not benefits to individuals, but rather reflect administrative investments in the local community for job preparation training and job creation for the clients making a transition from public assistance to employment. See Figure 11.1 in the text for information about TANF recipients and the average of TANF recipients in fiscal years 1998 through 2014. In Part 5 of Module 11 on entitlements, we'll discuss health care and Medicare.